Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Extra Serving, a restaurant industry podcast, a product of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality. I'm your host, Holly Petre, here with the latest episode. And now it's time to introduce my lovely co-hosts.
My name is Sam Oches, Editor-in-Chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
My name is Leigh Zinsmeister, Managing Editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
And I'm Ron Ruggless, Senior Editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
Hello, Ron. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You know, anybody who's watching this on YouTube probably doesn't know who you are, Holly. They're like, who's this rando who's on the podcast today?
Just like you did when you signed on.
Yes, exactly. I was like, oh no, wrong Zoom. But it was right Zoom, wrong Holly.
Right Zoom, right Holly. I'm back. I'm usually blonde. So this is me being back to blonde.
I've never known you blonde, so this is all very new to me.
Leanne has known me as a blonde, so I am back to blonde.
It's true.
All right, here we go. Blonde Holly.
Yes, Blonde Holly in her Wingstop merch. I went to a really cool Wingstop event for their new 420 blazed wings. That was pretty exciting. So that was very cool. They're doing this like wing with terpenoids and hemp in it, in the seasoning on top. And it also has Szechuan peppercorn. So the Szechuan peppercorn is meant to like make your mouth a little numb. So it's meant to have almost like a kind of psychedelic experience with it still being legal. And so I talked to the chef there and he was saying that the mixture of terpenoids and hemp is as close to cannabis as you can get with it being legal. So it looks like weed. It looks like it, like if you look at pictures, like they look identical. He was showing us like a ground up powder, and like if you see a picture side by side, they'd look identical.
They can look at this on our Instagram, yeah?
Yes, you can look at this on our Instagram.
Yep.
It's very cool. We have a reel of it, but it was a very interesting event. And it's just, I've never heard of somebody using terpenoids in food before.
And was it tasty?
It was pretty tasty. It was, as Brett called it, a little weird, but weird can be good.
Okay.
It's always nice to catch Brett a little bit off guard. I feel like Brett has seen and tried everything. So if you can get Brett to say something is a little weird, like that's high praise. You're doing something that no one else has done before.
Good boy.
It was definitely something that no one has done before. We're both commenting on that. So it was.
So
very
that's the thing. That's the thing,
go.
though. I think with the cannabis stuff is that like I think we're still in novelty phase, which is brands are like, hey, look at us, 420, huh? But you know, the maturity of this whole business has got to be to a point where it's like this is actually tasty, and you know, people want to order it not because of the like I'm posting to my Instagram, but like okay, this is good food and or good properties that I want in my body, and so I don't know. I guess we still have a ways to go till we get there.
Yeah, but interestingly, 420 promotions are really huge this year. I think the whole movement to legalize marijuana in so many states is really giving a lot of permission to brands to promote 420 specialties. I just don't want to put my wings in a wrapper.
No, you don't want to. Sure. I think all of us were like,
it took us all a second to understand the joke.
I don't know. I mean, it's like a burrito, right? A wing burrito, free idea, courtesy of the Extra Serving podcast.
Hope they're listening, whoever they are.
Whoever they are.
Or wing spleefs. I don't know. It's going to be difficult.
Yes.
Well, we did a video this week where we were in the office and we taste tested the new Panera Bread chicken sandwich. Leanne was part of the team that got to taste the sandwich. And Brett actually gave them some free marketing advice as well. So we're really in the business of giving these brands some free advice now, apparently.
NRN test kitchen, here we come.
Basically.
If they keep up with our multimedia content, yeah, you can get all kinds of free advice there.
That's right. And we're not saying it's good advice. It's just advice and it's free.
But you can hear it.
That's right.
It's free advice. It may not be great, but it's free.
That's right.
All right. So let's get into the news for the day. Let's start out with what the biggest news of the week may be, which has been kind of an ongoing saga, which has been Howard Schultz has taken over as CEO of Starbucks. And he's been quite vocal about unions. I will say vocal and let you guys go from there as in terms of what he has been saying. So what do you guys think about what he's been doing? Can you guys explain a little bit about the history of what's been happening here at Starbucks?
I don't think it's just Starbucks. I think it's across the spectrum of all employers. With the Great Resignation, unions have developed a larger foothold. And I think a lot of CEOs especially are concerned what that's going to do to the bottom line.
Totally. Yeah. So Howard Schultz is back at Starbucks as interim CEO following Kevin Johnson's retirement. And obviously, unions have been springing up at Starbucks. I think something like 16 stores are now officially unionized. More than 200 are actively moving in that direction. And the company has been vocal the whole time against the idea of unionization, as most employers are, as Ron said. But Howard Schultz has been back for less than a month, I believe, and has hosted town halls for his employees, has issued statements that are just, I would say, like aggressively anti-union. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think his posture has been the most surprising element of all this, or his attitude and the words that he's saying publicly, which are very aggressive. In that, you know, he's calling out unionization as a threat, and you know, just using very harsh terminology to describe these efforts. And there, you know, have been some reports of efforts that Starbucks is doing to try to persuade stores not to unionize. Some of this is unverified, so I couldn't stand behind anything here with fact. And Joanna, when next time we get Joanna on the podcast in the next couple of weeks, we'll have to have her give us a pretty comprehensive overview, because she's cranking out this content for us there at NRN. But I think the one thing that's just surprised me the most is here's a guy who is 2 years removed from running for the Democratic ticket, wanted to be president and as a Democrat. And you know, look, CEOs are not, it's not surprising that he's not pro-union, but it's just very interesting how harsh he has been anti-union, considering what this guy, and not to mention, just to keep it in the industry, is just to say Starbucks has been a real bastion of taking care of your employees and giving employees benefits and doing the right thing, quote unquote. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're so against the unionization effort, is because they're trying to tell their employees, look, we're already good by you. Why do you feel like you need to unionize? But also then to come out with some of the things they've said in letters and just vocally have been, harsh. So I don't know, puts it all in a new light. That is just really interesting to watch how this goes. And of course, it's going on in tandem with Amazon warehouse unionization too. So I think this is certainly not the last we will hear of companies trying to unionize.
It's interesting.
And also, go ahead.
No, Ron, you go first, please, sir.
It was Northwest is kind of a whole different mentality toward unions, but Burgerville, also based in the Northwest, has basically embraced the unionization effort amongst its staff. I think a lot of it is because it's privately held. Starbucks is very publicly held. I think there's an audience thing going on there as well.
Well, Leanne and I were speaking earlier this week about Schultz saying all of these things. And we were talking about how, you know, we talked about on the podcast a few weeks ago, the Applebee's letter, how, you know, sometimes you just shouldn't say the things out loud that you're thinking. And Schultz is saying a lot of the things out loud that he's thinking that he maybe shouldn't say out loud. A lot of the unspoken words are being spoken. We know that a lot of CEOs feel this way about unions, but Schultz is coming out and saying it publicly in a way that most CEOs temper themselves. So I'm finding that very interesting. It reminds me a lot of the Papa John saga. Papa John was very vocal. He was very vocal. John Shatner was very vocal and not a quiet CEO. And I feel like we're getting a little bit of that. I mean, we've had 6, Leanne, you were gone for a week, and I think we had 5 Starbucks stories about Howard Schultz saying stuff. I mean, that's something.
I should take vacation more often. No, it's true. I mean, this is certainly a little different in that this is a very deliberate choice that Howard Schultz is making. He's not accidentally saying these things out loud, but it is another example of that trend. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. The company is supposed to publish what they're calling a plan for worker satisfaction, I believe the first week of May. So it'll be interesting to see what that works like. Of course, will it apply to unionized stores? Probably not. So it'll just be interesting. I feel like we're still at the very, very beginning of this story, even though we've been talking about it for months. So.
Well, and by the way, I mean, the momentum for unionizing the stores is growing, which means that, I mean, we're talking about what, 16,000 Starbucks locations, give or take. So yeah, that's a long road to hoe there for unionization. But I wouldn't be surprised too if, you know, if a significant amount of stores start to vote against unionization, you know, momentum is a funny thing, which is it, you know, can die just as quickly as it can build. So there's still, that could yet happen if we do have a string of stores that vote no. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be a long process. So I'm sure we'll be writing about it for a long time yet to come.
A long road to hoe.
See, you heard that phrase before?
Is that a new one for you, Holly?
That's a new one for me, and it sounded very Southern.
Start using it. You'll sound smarter.
Or you'll be on a tobacco farm.
Yeah, that's more what it sounds like.
I'm sorry. I meant to say you'll sound more folksy.
All right. Well, moving on to inflation.
Yay. Not sure what reaction we were supposed to give there.
That tone of voice, man.
Inflation raised my rent, so I'm not happy about it. But inflation, it's here. It's going up. Lisa wrote a story this week that it's, you know, it's still going up. It's hitting a record high. I think it hit 8.5% for the year ending in March. I mean, it's insane. What do you guys think? What does this mean for the industry? What does it mean for, what kind of repercussions will it have for the restaurant industry?
Well, the bottom line is definitely going to take a hit because the cost of commodities is hitting everybody, and not just commodities, it's utilities, real estate, everything that goes into the profitability of a restaurant is suffering inflation. I was on the tail end of the whip inflation now buttons, the win buttons of the Ford administration. And it was, it's scary. And I think it's scary for everybody in the business right now.
And there's a lot of uncontrollable factors, of course, the war in Ukraine being one of them. Obviously, so many things being intertwined and, you know, sort of a domino effect. When one thing is affected, all these other things get affected, which so supply chain certainly is, continues to struggle, inflation being a big part of that. But I have been reading a lot about inflation recently, and it's interesting to see how, you know, talking about that inflation becomes sort of this, I don't know if self-fulfilled prophecy is the way to phrase it, but sort of this sustaining movement where the more people worry about inflation, the more it creates inflation because people rush out to buy things fearing that prices will go higher, and that in turn drives prices higher. And so there's a lot of that going on. There's just a lot of kind of freaking out going on. And simultaneously, you know, there's inflation. When inflation happens, workers ask for more pay to accommodate the inflation. And when companies then have to turn around and pay their employees more, that becomes a part of the inflation. So it's a crazy thing. But one thing I'll say, which is I find very interesting too, is I'm also seeing a lot of chatter about an impending recession. So, you know, and I talked to an executive recently who's like, that's all I'm thinking about right now is the upcoming recession and what that's going to look like. So because inflation, you know, some think that inflation has peaked. Some optimistic people think that we've kind of turned a corner on inflation that hopefully will continue to go down. But it's just so crazy to think that like the result of that is ultimately going to lead to recession. It feels like we're on this roller coaster, and I am not an economist, so I don't know a lot of the broader factors at play here, but just to say inflation is bad and recession is bad. So if we have to go from inflation to recession, then, well, that's just not fun.
And I hate roller coasters, so.
Oh, well, there you go. That
You're
clearly means
for some fun.
I'm with you, Holly.
I hate roller coasters. Ooh. Leanne, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, it's interesting because restaurant inflation is less than supermarket inflation at the moment. Inflation at limited service restaurants actually declined last month. That's just for the month of March. That's not the annual number, but still. But at the end of the day, the more money that consumers have to spend on gas and the things that they need to live, the less money they're going to have for quote unquote frivolous spending, such as restaurants. So it's the kind of thing where whatever the economy does impacts the restaurant industry, even if indirectly.
I mean, I'm contributing to the economy. I went to Taco Bell yesterday.
Yep. You're doing your part. Well
my
done.
favorite Taco Bell.
That's not the $1,000 television that maybe would have. Well, that was more
$1,000 television.
Remember early pandemic, they were talking about to getting us all out to go buy goods to protect against recession. That was the conversation we were having then.
Durable goods. The go buy a $4,000 refrigerator, Holly.
Yeah.
I'm in an
Take
apartment.
one for the team.
I don't need to buy one.
For America,
what do I
Holly.
Need to buy? For America. For America.
Don't you care about America?
You know what? I buy plenty of clothes. I'm doing it for America. That's what I'll say next time I buy some clothes. Doing it for America.
There you go.
All right. Well, on to our last topic, which is a 2-year on COVID review. We recently published a really interesting 2-year COVID review package on our website. All of our editors took a look at different segments of the industry and how COVID has impacted them over the past 2 years. So can you guys talk a little bit about what that package was and sort of how it all impacted everyone?
Yeah, I mean, when we started work on this to look at how the industry has changed over the course of the 2 years, it was interesting because when we did all these stories a year ago to talk about how 1 year into COVID things had changed, there was so much to cover, so much change that happened in the first year. So to do this at the 2-year mark is not so much to say, look at how much change, but really just to say, look at how much this is just life now and that this is normal and this is permanent. So, talking about that from a menu standpoint, Brett wrote about menus and how menus have changed, and largely the change to menus has been really positive in that chefs have learned how to get more efficient with ingredients and with packaging. They're not as wasteful with, certain ingredients they might put on the plates. A lot of restaurants that previously had no experience whatsoever in off-premises service started finding the potential in that. So they started crafting their menus more specifically around that. So that's a great piece from Brett. We of course write about service and technology. Holly, you wrote about virtual brands, which you can go into. I mean, that's been, I think, one of the biggest lasting effects of the pandemic is the push toward digital everything and what the implications were for brand building, which of course came out in virtual brands.
Yeah, so I wrote about virtual brands and just kind of basically how at the beginning of the pandemic, they were this novelty that just a few places had kind of started, and now they are everywhere and everything. If you don't have a virtual brand, you're kind of behind the times. Denny's just came out with one. IHOP came out with one. I mean, if family dining's doing one, I think everybody has one at this point. So I think we are at the point of complete ubiquity for your virtual brands. And so basically, my premise is, are they virtual brands? Are they a new category? Have they become matured enough to be a full category in our food ecosystem? And then Ron, you wrote a piece as well. Why don't you tell us about it?
Right. I wrote about philanthropy and community, which someone tweeted out last night that the restaurant industry continues to have one of the biggest hearts of any industry around. And I really agree. It's been tough for philanthropies and community, but the restaurant industry continues to give back in a big way. And I think they've changed a little bit in their tactics, but the overall effect of giving money or giving help to the community. Somebody said they put service in food service, and I really agree with that.
Well, and something that was interesting, you noted in your piece, I mean, early in the pandemic, it was take care of the frontline workers. I mean, there was a lot of attention paid toward, frontline workers in the community and taking care of them. But there has been a lot of also sort of inward looking feelings around philanthropy, and that companies are really looking at their own employees who need support and taking care of folks within their own systems. And so I think there was a lot to learn from the togetherness we all briefly at least had early in the pandemic, the fact of like, we're all in this together, let's take care of each other. And I think that continues. I mean, I agree with you, Ron. I mean, this industry is one of the best at giving back to the communities, because it's the communities who ultimately keep these restaurants sustained. And so there's been a lot to learn about how to build off of that, I guess, philanthropically.
Exactly.
Well, that is a beautiful note to end on. Ron, why don't you tell us about your interview for the week?
Yes, I'm really excited about this concept. It's out of Kansas City. It's called Chicken and Pickle. It's pickleball. Each of the units has about an acre with, they could accommodate up to 1,500 people for playing pickleball. It's growing, I think 38% over the past 2 years in the number of players for pickleball. So it's this whole segment of entertainment and food and diversion. And I think people are really, pardon the pun, hungry for that coming out of the pandemic. I talked with Bill Crooks of Chicken and Pickle and their new design firm from Populous, Mason Powali.
Very interesting. I've never played pickleball, but I know the sound is very loud. So that's all I know about pickleball.
I'm thinking NRN team pickleball challenge next time we're near a court, maybe NRA show.
I'll eat fried pickles while you play.
Well, thank you everyone for joining me this week. It's been lovely, and we will see you all next week.